Hey everyone, good day to all of you. I wanted to look today at some upgrades for the AK side folding triangle stock. While it is certainly a really cool looking stock and certainly very iconic, classic, I think it is the least usable stock right out of the box compared to pretty much everything else out there. So you can see I've put a lot of different stuff on here. I have a cheek riser and I have a very unique butt pad on here. And I was originally going to do this as two separate videos on, just a kind of a short review on this and a short review on this, but I figured it'd be better to just do one review on all this because there's also a lot of context and a lot of reasoning behind why I did these upgrades. I didn't just put these on willy-nilly. So I was going to talk about them all today. If you are, however, interested in just one specific part, then do check the description below for the timestamps. You could just skip directly to just me talking about that part, and I'll have them up on the screen right here now as well. So I'm going to start, however, by talking about the context, and then I'll actually, I do think actually the butt pad makes the biggest difference in terms of usability, but I am going to talk about the cheek riser first after providing context, simply because there's a lot more going on with it, a lot more interesting stuff. But before going to that, let me talk about why I think any of these upgrades are necessary at all. So starting, if you have ever shot with the triangle stock, one thing that I've personally always ran into is the butt pad is awful, or rather just the butt plate, because there's no pad on here from the factory. So there are some different models of these triangle stocks. However, the most common one is like this one, just this Bulgarian one. And what you'll see on the back here, just from the overlay prior to me putting on this butt pad, this whole thing is just slick. There is no texturing whatsoever, and it's just a very narrow piece of metal. So the major issue I always ran into when trying to shoot with this is it would want to slide around on my shoulder a ton, even on a very low recoiling like a AK-74 and 5.45. It was very unpleasant and would be quite slow because I'm having to slide the stock back into my shoulder pocket every time. Now, like I said, there are some other types of triangle stocks out there that some of them do have some little ribs stamped into the rear. Maybe those would work better, but in my case, that is the reason I put this butt pad on. Not necessarily for any recoil management. It's not really an issue. And it's not really to add any length of pull, though it does add a little bit, but mostly it is just to fix that issue with it moving around. Second, another issue I found with any metal stock, especially on this one because this is just steel. So I put this cheek riser on here just to help with extreme cold. Of course, if you're in a very hot area, this will help with extreme heat as well. So good either way. And furthermore, if you are using a higher optic and you're used to the more conventional actual cheek weld on the stock, then this has a lot of room for adjustment, so you can raise it up and get that similar indexing point that you're used to. So with that context out of the way, let's actually go a bit more in depth talking about this cheek riser. So this is the Military Equipment ME cheek riser from Ukraine. I picked up one of these through AK Guys. It's about $100 at least currently when I'm making this, though they do actually go on sale pretty frequently, and I got it on sale, so I got a fair bit off. I think $20, maybe $15 off. Not bad at all. This is a pretty nice cheek riser. So starting with how does this install? I didn't bother recording the installation because it's just a little awkward to get that camera angle I found, but it's really simple. So you have 8 screws here in the bottom. So you can see those right there. Now this just actually has a top, sort of like a scope ring that actually just goes around your top of your stock right here. You can see, and it kind of sits. And the one thing, when I first got this, it came pre-installed with shorter screws. I'm not really sure exactly what type of stock those shorter screws are for, but if you have a regular triangle stock like I have here, those shorter screws are not going to fit, but they do have longer ones. So they just have a bag of a huge amount of screws, and yeah, just easy. Popped all those short screws out, replaced them with the long ones that they shipped, and it went on totally fine. It's a metal to metal connection, so I really torqued this down. Nothing's moving there. On the cheek riser, the cheek pad itself, this connects with 2 fasteners right there. You do have a washer on it. Now this is actually just leather, actual leather, which is cool. You can actually smell it when you're aiming with it, especially when it's brand new, as this one is, or pretty much brand new. And it's kind of padded. It has a little bit of give to it, but it's mostly rigid. So don't expect this to be like a pillow. And I would also caution you to not over torque these 2 screws. I didn't vibratite these. I thought I might need to, but I've got about 150 rounds on this stock with all this installed, and yeah, these haven't backed out. Like I said, I didn't use any thread locker or anything. They're fine. I just snugged them down until they just barely started to depress into the leather, into the pad itself. You can see with the washer right there, or maybe you can't. It's so minimal, and if you just do about that amount, then yeah, it'll hold on there really well. Below here, you do have this giant thumb screw sort of thing, and this is how you adjust the height. Now you can get this insanely high, so if you're using like a GBRS Hydra mount on here, then you could actually still get a cheek weld with how high this goes. This works pretty similarly to something like your Zenitco stocks, except for example, instead of like on this PT3 stock right here, where you have these little notches, you can see these little cutouts where you have pretty much actual positions you can slide this up and down on. On this stock, it's just a continuous slider. And it actually has underneath here a lock washer, kind of like what you have on your AR pistol grips. So it holds. I've never had this slide loose so far. You'll still probably want to check it. It's not the tightest thing, but if you're worried about it, you can also snug it down because it does have a slot right there. You can pop a screwdriver in there. Just to give you a feeling of how high this can go. So here this is at the highest setting. You can see, like I said, you could get like a Hydra on here and still be totally fine. This puts the cheek riser pretty much in line with the side mount that I have on here, just one of the Midwest Industries side mounts. And also, one thing I didn't mention yet, but actually it's pretty nice. So you can see now that I have this raised, you can see this is how it connects to the stock. One cool thing about this is you can put this wherever you want. So I'm usually more straight up when I'm shooting, more of the modern kind of heads up shooting stance. So I put this one a little bit further back for me, but if you want to lean forward more, if you have a long neck or something, then you can just slide this forward. You could put the this whole cheek riser all the way up here at the front, further back, whatever you want. So it's really, really well thought out so far, working perfectly. And installation is really easy too. Moving back now to this butt pad right here. Now I'm not actually sure who exactly made this, so I picked this up through Russian Surplus, and they just describe it as the Russian recoil reducing butt pad. Now this will look pretty similar if you're familiar with like the grenade launching butt pads that they have for AKs. For example, this one. This butt pad is of a similar rubber for the most part. However, this one actually bolts into the stock itself, so nice and rigid, whereas your old style grenade launching type just goes on with a belt. Always would like to slide around a little bit. Now one other issue with the grenade launching butt pad is you can see how wide it is, which can be kind of comfortable. However, this will actually block your triangle stock from being able to fold, which you may or may not care about. Personally, in my case, it's actually kind of lost on me because of the aforementioned cheek riser that I was just talking about. This actually blocks it from folding anyway, because you can see how much it sticks out right here. But if I were to not have this cheek riser, then yeah, you could totally fold the stock with this attached. And furthermore, I have the side mount here, so yeah, definitely not folding this as it is. Looking a little bit though at the installation, there are a few things I wanted to note. So this ships with 2 of these slotted and Phillips head screws. These are a number 6 by 32, or a ½ inch, I should say, screw. And the reason I have an entire bag of these is because these ones that got shipped with it actually stripped out. And I don't necessarily think that these are of a low quality or anything, but one issue I ran into is that it's kind of difficult to get these 2, there you go, you can see right there, these 2 screws are pretty hard to get in there and actually torque down. So the issue I found out after several hundred rounds was that the bolt itself was kind of getting wobbled back and forth under the recoil, and eventually it just stripped out those threads. So I removed both of those fasteners, bought new ones, and I vibra-tighted them. So I would highly recommend applying some thread locker. Torque these down as much as possible. I wasn't able to get it to as tight as I would like, but it is holding now with the vibra-tight and everything. One thing you can do to help you get a little bit more torque on it, I used a breaker bar with just a socket attached to it. Works fairly well. However, on the bottom fastener right here, since this sits so close to where the triangle stock starts to angle up right here, you can't really get this tool in there. So one alternative you might want to look into is if you're wanting to really torque this down, if you're having issues with it wanting to walk out, you could use some pliers. I was a bit worried about that because I don't have any marring pliers myself, so I didn't want to, scratch up the finish. Now on the topic of torque, I did want to mention that although this is a rubber, for the most part, butt pad, when you get it, it's going to smell like a tire and everything, but actually the internals, where everything is torquing against, you actually have a metal slot in here that the screws sit against. So there's really no concern of you over torquing this and tearing out the rubber from having too much torque. You don't need to worry about that whatsoever. Now one little quirk I did want to mention about the installation of this butt pad, it's that there is not really any obvious hole for you to insert the fastener into, but there actually is, if you can see, because I have taken this off several times, you can kind of see a indentation. So this looks like it is a solid piece of rubber, but these are actually cut away. So you can just push the screw right through each of these, and then it'll just go through. You just hold it in there and then tighten everything down like normal. Last thing I wanted to mention on the butt pad here, do make sure that you are particularly careful in measuring the distance from the hole to hole, because they do make different butt pads. Some are for the Krinkov stocks and some are for the Bulgarian and all the other types of triangle stocks, because they do actually have a different center to center measurement on those two drilled out holes. They are pretty different though, so you can just get a rough estimate. I think it's almost an inch different between the two models, so as long as you're approximately there, you'll get the right model. So just a few small parts, kind of a little bit on the more expensive side given what they are, but they do work great. I would say if you are looking at getting a triangle stock and you don't have one yet, I wouldn't even bother going with one, because I did have to do all this to get it usable. But if you're like me and you just happen to have one of these sitting around, because this came on my SLR and I replaced it and just had it sitting since, then this is a great way to make an old stock a lot more usable and a lot more modern. Obviously you don't have length of pull adjustment, but it gets most of the way there with everything else that's going on, so I think that it's worth it. If you have any other questions on any of the stuff here, or any other recommendations for parts, because there are other makers of some aftermarket accessories to modernize the triangle stocks, then by all means, we'd love to hear that. Comments below. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you all in the next one.